In the darkest corners of the galaxy, where time bleeds into madness and stars die screaming, a mortal dared to become more than a man. He was known across countless battlefields as Karvath the Undying, a warlord of the Black Legion, chosen by the War Master himself, a butcher whose name was etched in terror upon the tongues of those who still dared whisper it. Karvath was no mere soldier. He was destruction, incarnate, a storm of fury wrapped in black ceramite and bound by unholy faith. His chainsword sang in the slaughter. His bolter spat death and blasphemy in equal measure. Every kill he made was an offering, every scream a hymn to the dark gods. And they were listening. For decades he fought, bathing in the blood of Imperials Eldar, and even his own traitorous brothers. His faith was not in mercy nor in loyalty, and it was in power. Chaos was his gospel and war his prayer. On the shattered world of Vardis Naim it happened. Under a sky torn apart by demonic fire, Karvath stood atop a mountain of corpses and his enemies broken. His warriors dead, his armor cracked and burning. The ground beneath him split open, vomiting rivers of molten blood that sizzled in the freezing air. He should have died that day. But the gods had other plans. The veil between reality and the immaterium thinned. The air became thick with whispers, voices older than creation, seductive and terrible. You have pleased us, mortal. You have killed in our name, and you have bled without fear. You are worthy. Karvath fell to his knees, laughing as lightning danced across his armor, his body convulsed and his flesh tearing, his bones twisting into new, impossible shapes. The battlefield around him dissolved into a swirling maelstrom of colors. Beyond mortal sight, his enemies watched in horror as the sky screamed. He felt their eyes, 4 divine, hateful suns burning through his soul. The laughter of Khorne, the whispers of Tzeentch, the rot-filled joy of Nurgle, and the intoxicating purr of Slaanesh merged into a single chorus of damnation. He roared their names. He offered them his life, his soul, his eternity, and they accepted. In a burst of unholy brilliance, Karvath was reborn. His armor melted into his flesh, his wings tore through his back, and his eyes flared with warp fire. His voice became thunder, his presence a storm of madness. He was no longer Karvath the Undying. He was Karvath the Ascended, a demon prince of chaos. The gods crowned him with eternal power, but they did not whisper the truth, that daemonhood is not a gift. It is a sentence. The first eternity began with glory. Legions of lesser demons knelt before him, chanting his name in voices that made reality shiver. Mortal cults on distant worlds built temples of bone in his honor. He could shape the fabric of existence with a single thought. He was worshipped as a god. He felt infinite. He felt unstoppable. But slowly, something began to change. The warp was not a paradise. It was alive, conscious, malicious, and hungry. Every desire became torment. Every pleasure decayed into despair. There was no night or day, no rest or silence, only endless screaming colors and the laughter of unseen horrors. Karvath's power grew, but so did the madness gnawing at his soul. He tried to build a kingdom, a realm of his own within the immaterium, but the warp twisted everything he created. His palaces of crystal turned into flesh and bone. His rivers of molten gold became rivers of blood. His throne fused to his back until it became part of him, a symbol of his power and his prison. When he spoke, his voice warped into 1,000 whispers. When he dreamed, his dreams came alive and tore him apart just for amusement. The realization struck him like a thunderbolt. The gods had given him everything he wanted, except peace. Daemonhood was immortality, yes, but it was also eternity without end. He was no longer a man who could live or die. He was an idea, a thing that existed because the gods willed it. And the gods never stopped hungering, every time. Karvath looked at his reflection in the rivers of blood that ran through his realm. He saw a different face, a monstrous, twisted inhuman. Eyes grew where there should be none. Wings fused and unfused. His mouth split open like a wound, whispering prayers he didn't remember learning. He had become a living paradox, both divine and damned. And somewhere in that endless horror, a whisper of humanity still screamed within him. For all his might, he longed for the weight of air on his face, for the sound of a mortal heartbeat, for death, the one thing forever denied to him. That longing was the beginning of his fall. He did not yet know it, but his torment had only just begun. Time does not move in the warp. It writhes, it bleeds, it dances around itself like a serpent eating its own tail. And for Karvath the Ascended, eternity had become a prison made of color and agony. He ruled over nothing. His subjects, demons of lesser power, worshipped him in mockery, their praises laced with laughter that never ceased. He had torn stars apart, devoured souls, and burned whole realities to ash. Yet every act of conquest brought no satisfaction. He began to understand that in the realm of chaos nothing truly belonged to him. Not even himself. He was a weapon, a toy, a song the gods played when they wished to hear him scream. But then, through the storms of madness, a voice reached him. It was faint at first, like a flicker of light in an infinite night, a mortal voice, desperate, trembling, calling, his name through blood and sacrifice. Karvath the Undying. Hear me, I summon thee. Lord of Chaos, hear thy servant. He froze. No one had called him that name in an eternity. Undying, a name from when he had still been flesh. The call burned through the immaterium like a chain of fire, and for the first time in countless ages, Karvath felt something new, purpose. He spread his molten wings, and the warp screamed in response. The gods watched with cold amusement as he tore through the veil between worlds. The fabric of reality shuddered, and Karvath fell through, crashing into existence like a comet of living fire. He emerged in a world drenched in smoke and ruin, a dying imperial hive city. Its towers broken, its people scattered. The air was heavy with ash and fear, and there on a blood-soaked altar made of broken bones knelt a lone figure, a man. A mortal sorcerer. The fool was trembling, his robes soaked in his own blood. Around him lay the mutilated bodies of those he had sacrificed to summon the Prince of the Warp. Great Karvath, the mortal whispered. Lord of Chaos, I have done as you commanded. Grant me your blessing. Grant me the power to destroy my enemies. Karvath stepped forward, his wings stretching into the storm. His form filled the shattered cathedral, too vast, too monstrous to be real. His voice rolled like thunder, shaking the bones of the earth. You dare summon me? The sorcerer fell to his knees, shaking. I serve you, my lord. I offer my soul, I beg. Karvath's laughter drowned out the man's plea. It was a sound that made stone weep and fire dim, yet beneath that laughter was something else, something broken. He looked upon the mortal, and for the briefest heartbeat, he envied him. The man was trembling, terrified, fragile, alive. His heartbeat echoed like a drum of life. His blood steamed in the cold air. He had something Karvath no longer possessed. Mortality. To die was a curse to mortals, but to a demon prince it was the greatest mercy. Karvath reached out. His clawed hand, the size of a tank, hovered above the trembling man. The sorcerer's eyes filled with awe and terror. You wish for power? Karvath said, his voice deep and ancient. Then take it. His talon brushed the man's forehead. In an instant, the mortal screamed, his body twisting, flesh melting, soul igniting in warp fire, the air filled with the scent of burning faith. And in that scream, Karvath felt the echo of his own damnation. He saw himself, long ago on that battlefield of blood and lightning, when he had begged for ascension. He saw the same hunger, the same pride, the same blind desire. He had been this man once, a mortal who believed that power was freedom. But power, he realized, was only another name for chains. The sorcerer's body collapsed into ash. His soul was dragged screaming into the immaterium. The altar cracked, the sky darkened, and the warp began to pull Karvath back. He roared in protest, clutching the ground with claws of fire. No, let me stay. He wanted to breathe air again, to feel the pain of flesh, the weight of the world, the beating of a heart. But the warp was jealous. It refused to release him. Invisible hands of light and shadow seized him, dragging him back through the veil. The mortal world dissolved in a storm of chaos, and in moments he was gone. When Karvath opened his eyes again, he was back in the immaterium. His realm had changed, and had him warped, corrupted, mocking him for his weakness. The demons whispered among themselves. Some laughed. Others hissed in fear. He ignored them. He fell to his knees and roared into the void. You mock me, gods. You made me your plaything. The warp trembled. 4 voices answered as one. You begged for eternity, and we gave it. You wished to be remembered, and you are. You are chaos incarnate, Karvath. You will never be mortal again. Their laughter tore through him like fire through silk. His wings burned, his flesh melted, and his body reformed again and again. Endless agony, endless rebirth. And deep inside that torment, a thought took root. A dangerous thought. A heretical thought. If the gods could create him, then perhaps somehow he could learn to unmake himself. He began to wonder if even the dark gods were prisoners, trapped by their own hunger, their own eternal need to consume the emotions of mortals. Were they truly free, or were they slaves to the chaos they embodied? The warp roared in fury. The thought alone brought punishment. Reality cracked. His realm dissolved. He was cast into the void, alone drifting in endless nothing. His screams echoed across dimensions no mortal could comprehend. Time passed again, or maybe it didn't. The concept had no meaning anymore. Carvath floated in the dark silence between madness and thought. And then he saw something, a light. A world beyond the veil. A child, a simple human child, and kneeling in prayer beneath a broken sky, whispering to a god that could never answer. Something deep within him stirred, a spark of the man he once was, the last ember of Carvath the Undying. Flickered inside the abyss of his soul. He whispered his old name, and for a moment, the warp fell silent. Silence. For the first time in eternity there was silence. The warp of that sea of screams and madness grew still. Even the laughter of the gods faded. Carvath drifted in the void, staring at that faint light, beyond the veil in the fragile world, where a child prayed to the Emperor of mankind. That prayer, small and trembling, pierced him deeper than any blade. He could feel the words through the barrier of reality, soft and pure. "Please protect us, my lord. Don't let the monsters come tonight." Monsters. He almost laughed, but the sound never came. He was the monster the child prayed against. He was the shadow whispered about in imperial temples, the terror painted on cathedral walls, the face of the gods that mortals feared but could never understand. And yet, as he watched that flickering candle of innocence, Carvath felt something break inside him. Not anger, not hate, regret. He remembered being human. The hunger, the pride, the ambition that made him sell his soul for power. He remembered the warmth of the sun, the sting of cold air, the sound of laughter from men who followed him into war. He remembered dying once, or at least thinking he had, and how the gods had twisted that death into something eternal. Now in this endless torment he finally understood. Daemonhood was not ascension. It was punishment, the gods' cruel joke on mortals who desired to be divine. He had traded his mortality for a throne that could never be left. And now, after countless eternities, he wished only to end. He stretched his wings, great and terrible, and rose through the void until he stood upon the edge of the Immersive, where the warp touched the materium like oil upon water. He could see the stars beyond, silent and beautiful. He could feel the heartbeat of the galaxy, pulsing with life and death and hope. He reached out his clawed hand, shimmering with warp fire. The barrier sizzled beneath his touch. Reality bent, screaming at his presence. He could almost feel it, the breath of the mortal realm. And then, as if drawn by fate, he heard them again. The gods. "Carvath, our wandering child. Do you seek escape?" Their voices rippled across his mind like poison. He could feel their amusement and their endless mocking love. "I seek release," Carvath growled. "I have served. I have slaughtered. I have given all. End me." A pause, then laughter so vast that it shook the warp itself. "End you? There is no end. You are eternal as we are." Carvath clenched his fists, his wings trembling with fury. "Then what is the purpose of this torment? Why give power if it brings only pain? Why call it ascension when it is a curse?" Tzeentch's voice whispered like silk. "Because mortals crave what they do not understand." Slaanesh purred. "You wanted pleasure, Carvath, the ecstasy of victory. We gave you an eternity of it." Nurgle chuckled. "You wanted life everlasting. I granted it in rot and ruin. And then came the thunderous growl of Khorne. You wanted war, mortal. You live in war unending." Their words crashed upon him like waves of flame and poison. "You lie," Carvath roared. "You feed on us, on our souls, our hate, our desire. We are your chains, not your champions." The warp exploded in fury. His realm, his prison, burst into flames. The gods' laughter shook the cosmos. "You dare accuse your creators? I accuse you of everything." Carvath shouted. "You are not gods, you are parasites. You feed on the emotions of mortals because you cannot create your own. You are slaves, just as I am." The universe itself seemed to stop. Even the demons lurking in the distance froze in terror. And then the voice of Tzeentch, calm, soft, cold. "Perhaps you are right." The words chilled him more than all the others, because in that moment he saw it, a flicker deep within the immaterium, a glimpse of truth too terrible for sanity. He saw the gods not as divine beings, but as reflections, living mirrors of the souls of every mortal that had ever lived. The rage of Khorne, the decay of Nurgle, the desire of Slaanesh, the ambition of Tzeentch, all born from the hearts of men. And so long as mortals lived, the gods could never die. Neither could he. He sank to his knees, trembling. "Then there is no end," he whispered. "Not for you. Not for me." The gods spoke again, their voices merging into a single sound and vast, terrible, beautiful. "There is no end, Karvath the Undying. There is only eternity." Something inside him broke completely then. But in that breaking came peace. He rose slowly, his vast form illuminated by the dying light of 1,000 shattered realities. His wings spread, casting shadows across the void. And then something happened the gods did not expect. He smiled. "Then if I cannot end, I will defy you forever." They laughed again, but the laughter was uneasy. Karvath turned his back on them. He walked into the endless dark, vanishing into the folds of the warp where even the gods rarely tread. They called after him, but he did not answer. Some say he wanders still, a forgotten prince who refuses to serve, a ghost of divine rebellion haunting the dreams of mortals. Some cults whisper his name not as prayer, but as warning. "Beware, Karvath, the weeping prince and the god who remembers being human." Others say that sometimes on quiet nights in the warp, you can still hear him whispering, not in hatred but in sorrow. To live is to suffer, to die is to end, but to be eternal is to burn forever. The gods have forgotten him now, but the warp never truly forgets, and somewhere far beyond the eyes of gods and mortals alike, Karvath still walks the unending storms, his tears falling like burning stars across the void, forever longing for what he once was. If this story pulled you into the darkness of the warp, then don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell, my friend, because more twisted tales from the Warhammer universe are coming. Tell me in the comments, do you believe Daemonhood is power and/or punishment? Until the next story, may the Emperor protect you, or the dark gods claim you.